People often forget how interesting their own stories are. I meet a lot of guys that are like, oh, you've got an interesting story. And I'm like, it's not, it's my story. And I've learned a lot from it. I worked from the age of 18 till about 36 working in finance, and for 20 years, but for about 15 of those years, I actually really enjoyed it. And I think for a lot of men, we go through phases of our life where it can be a relationship as much as a career, that maybe one day you turn around and you're like, this isn't what it was to start with. But one day you start to think, can I do this for another 20, 30 years? So I got to the stage where I had plenty of money in the bank and I had the BMW convertible and the townhouse, but my 10 hours a day at my desk, I was like, this is not what I want to do anymore.
Anthony, my brother, welcome to the Superhuman Life.
Frank, it's a pleasure. As a fellow podcaster, I know the joys of podcasting, what it can do to transform your world, but also how much it is to like set things up and get things, the tech and everything else. So I'm always good to speak to other guys in this kind of men's space and see what they've been doing as much as what we've been doing with the Whole Man Academy.
Yeah, absolutely, brother. And that's a great kind of kickoff launch point, I think, where we can really kind of start here today's conversation. You mentioned, you got the Whole Man Academy. You've been running the show, I think, for a little over 3 years now, doing the men's coaching. You talked about this new community that you're going to be building. I know we're going to get into all of that stuff. Where I'd like to maybe start here today with you, Anthony, is I want to go back a couple years prior to the podcast. I want to go pre-coaching, Anthony. I know you had a very successful career working in the city, stocks, trading, finance. Talk to us about the time in your life then. What kind of triggered you? What was the genesis for wanting to get into the podcasting, coaching space? And what, if anything, lessons from your time working in corporate finance, and I almost said corporate America, you're in the UK, working in the corporate world, taught you that have made you successful in what you're doing here today?
Yeah, it's a really good question to start, because it's, people often forget how interesting their own stories are. And, I meet a lot of guys that are like, oh, you've got an interesting story. And I'm like, it's not, it's my story. And I've learned a lot from it. So that's an interesting one you pointed to. But, in a nutshell, I worked from pretty much the age of 18 till about 36, something like that, working in finance, trading, broking, primarily broking. And for, I would say, let's just call it 20 years, but probably for about 15 of those years, I actually really enjoyed it. And I think for a lot of men, we go through phases of our life where it can be a relationship as much as a career, that maybe one day you turn around and you're like, this isn't what it was to start with. And very much for me, my life looked like, for those broking years, I had to be up at 5:30. I had to be on a train at 6:07. I was at my desk at 6:45 in the morning in London, with hundreds and hundreds of other brokers, primarily 95% men. And basically you were at your desk from 6:45 in the morning till at least 5, sometimes later. And then several nights a week you had to go out with clients as well, which was cool for a while. But one day you start to think, can I do this for another 20, 30 years or something like that? And what you found was, I wouldn't call it burnout, because I was very healthy and fit and, did a lot of gym work. And so I wasn't allowing myself to get burnt at both ends, if that makes sense. But I became slightly disillusioned with the prospect of sitting at a desk for, which we're not made to do. Let's be honest. We're not made to sit at a desk for 10 hours a day, 200 hours a month. So I got to the stage where, I had plenty of money in the bank and I had the trappings of success. That's why they're called trappings, because you don't want to let them go. But, the BMW convertible and the townhouse, and I'd got to the stage of having like a cover model body, if that makes sense. So I was doing a lot of gym work. But my 10 hours a day at my desk, I was like, this is not what I want to do anymore. And around the time that I started to think there must be more to life than this, I'd always been interested in health, fitness, that kind of, the physical side of things. And my partner, Emma, said to me, hey, you should start listening to podcasts. And I was like, I'm not listening to podcasts. I'm busy. I always say I'm busy being busy. Joking aside, it turned out she was right, because the first 2 podcasts I listened to, one of them was a guy called James Swanwick, who developed the blue light blocking glasses called Swannies. I'd listened to his podcast. Yeah. And another guy called Andy Murphy, who's based out in some of his time in Tampa. His podcast was Life by Design. And on those 2 podcasts, those kind of combined, firstly, I first heard the term Tony Robbins. And I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. I'm going to listen to his stuff. And the other podcast was all about Life by Design. And it was very much like, what do you want your life to look like? And I didn't want my life to look like 200 hours a month sitting at a desk doing something I was bored with, no matter how much money you paid me. And maybe that resonates with people, because let's say I was on 100 grand a year, for argument's sake, but Even if you just said, we'll give you 200 grand a year, I'm still bored for 10 hours a day, unfulfilled at my desk. I'll have a nicer car, I'll have a Lamborghini, I'll have a, you'll start buying more toys and what have you. But those 10 hours a day, you're still trading time for money, and the time you're spending isn't very fulfilling. So basically, I had to, have a bit of a serious conversation with myself, because it's easy to stay in a job that you get well paid in. It's really comfortable. And you can just think, oh, do you know what? I can fuck about here and I'll just get paid the same money at the end of the month. And, just kind of glide through life. But I then call it sleepwalking through life. So that was when I started going to personal development events. Tony Robbins, I went to, Miami to Date with Destiny, did the ones in London, did the ones in Tenerife, and did a lot of kind of inner work. And that helped me leave the city. And, that's when I knew that I wanted to start something that was to do with men, which I love being around guys. I've spent so many years around that, mindset, personal development, and basically network and community, because the last couple of years have shown us that, people need to be together in person, not just digitalized. And I'll stop talking and throw it back to you.
Yeah, brother. No, that's all good, man. There's a lot there that we can kind of pick apart here. I think that there's a lot of parallels in kind of our journeys. I've never heard it phrased that way. Obviously, I've heard the term trappings of success. I've never actually broken it down, like, which is crazy because I'm such like a wordsmith. Like I pay attention to the meaning behind words. And hearing you say that, it's like, damn, that is so true, right? It's like sometimes we chase these things, we chase these material possessions, the houses, the cars, the watch, the boats, all these things. We get there and then we almost become a slave to our own material success. I want to ask you a question here, Anthony, because hearing you say it's like six figures and it's like, yeah, I could have made more money and I could have had a nicer car, this and that. I know the guy that's probably maybe making 40 to 50K right now that's hearing this. He's like, this dude, he's so full of it, right? Like I would give anything in the world to have that life that you just described, that you decided you wanted to walk away from. Do you think that there needs to be a point where we all get that taste, trappings of success, in order to break free from it? Or do you think that there's a way that a person can kind of get some of the lessons that you learned never achieving the material success?
It's a great question, because I think that's how you can learn from others' mistakes. And, I've spoken to some guys now who will be looking monetarily to do better all the time. And then I say to them, I wrote an article a while ago where I was like, let's say you've got four options. You can be paid, I think it was like 200 grand a year and work 5 days a week doing something you enjoy, or 100 grand a year doing 4 days a week, or 60 grand a year doing 3 days a week. And you'd be surprised how what I was trying to get the guys to do is say, I'd rather favor some free time and earn less money. Now, you still want money to do nice things and stuff, but there's kind of that tipping point where you say, if you're doing something that you just don't enjoy anymore, it doesn't really matter how much money. You might have that plan of, I'll do it for another year and then I'll save. But no one's going to, unless you're earning a massive load of money, you're never going to save up enough money to be able to walk away and just be completely comfortable with what you're doing. So, yeah, I think I've heard enough guys who have got million. I was never really rich comparatively to some that's earning 50. When you're earning near 100, you pay a lot more tax as well. And when you get bonuses, 50% of it or 45% of your bonus just goes on tax. I mean, that's a big scam in itself, but that's another rabbit hole to go down. But when people say, "Oh, did you get a bonus?" and you say, "Yeah, I got," let's say one of years you get like $100,000 bonus, and it sounds cool, but actually the exchange rate means you only got £60,000, and 30 of that gets taken in tax. So it sounds exciting and sexy to be like 100 grand bonus. We actually get 30 grand in your bank account, and that won't even buy you one brand new car these days.
Yeah, I don't know how accurate this statement is, and I think that there's obviously some data supporting this. But in terms of like money buying you happiness, material possessions, I think they say here in the States, it's around 70, 75K. Once you've reached that, you've kind of reached a point where it's like, okay, debt collectors are kind of like they're not calling, your phone's not ringing up, like you're not chasing you're not running out of money before you run out of month type of thing. And I think they say at that point, it's like no more amount of money until maybe you get well beyond seven or maybe eight figures is going to change your overall quality of your life. And I think that's kind of what you're speaking to. It's right. It's like, it's not always going to be more money. I want to zoom in on a specific phrase you said though, because you said free time. Curious what you were meaning about, I would rather choose more free time versus work, because I've had a handful of people on the podcast that have built multi-million dollar companies. They've exited from these things, right? They'll work 100 hours a week for 3 years to build a company, exit from it, leave it, have all the money in the world. Then they wake up 6 months later with all the free time in the world and they're miserable. I believe that we're created to work intentionally, though. We're not created to be a slave for somebody else's position. But I do believe that a part of why we're here is to actually work. So I'm curious what you mean when you actually say free time. Are we just sitting on the couch, mindlessly scrolling Netflix, or what? How are we intentionally maybe using some of that free time?
Yeah, no, it's good because I think that's the important one to clarify. My saying is the your goal in life should be not to have to work. So you can say, I know guy. I've just spoke to a guy who, earns good money, works from home, but like his parents have been sick, so he's like, okay, well, for a couple of days, I'm just going to speak to them and just take care of them. So he will work and do that. But like for all of us, I mean, a lot of guys we've dealt with through the Whole Man Academy, you're absolutely right. Fun enough, I actually spoke to a guy this morning who's 77, okay, and doing a bit of coaching with him, and he doesn't realize I'm learning from him instead of him learning from me because I'm helping him, but what he when he retired within 3 weeks he said, I was like, what do I do now, because you pottered around and done a bit of gardening and you're bored. And very quickly he started a new company with a friend, and he said for those 3 weeks, I was playing at being happy. And we see a lot of guys who get like we call it gardening leave over here. So if you're leaving one company to go to a competitor, they make you contractually stay out for 3 or 6 months. So they'll pay your full salary, but you're not allowed to start your new company. And a lot of guys, even when you've got money coming in, you've suddenly got no real purpose because you're just at home. So you're right. Free time for me is being able to do what you want, not do nothing. Now, if that means nothing, cool. And I hardly ever do nothing. I've got three kids and a business to run, and I like to stay fit and healthy. But free time means free option for you to do what you want. So very much for me. If you just sit and do nothing, you get bored very quickly. Now, I got made redundant in two different companies, and one of them I went straight to another job. But the second one, I remember, like, I'd walk my partner to the train station in the morning, and when I'd come home, I had money in the bank, but I didn't know what to do because I was like, you shut the door on the world, and it's 6:15 in the morning, and you're like, what do I do now? Because you're so used to getting up and going to work, and I had nothing to work on at the time. So it's a massive one for guys because I mean, you look at the mental health statistics, suicide rate, or let's call it taking your own life, because some people don't like the term committed suicide, which is fair enough. But I think in the States and close to the UK, it's something like 4 times as many men as women now taking their own life. Now, why is that? I mean, there's multiple things, but I think men feeling a disconnection from life and not having anything fulfilling and being a bit lost is a significant contribution to it.
Yeah, let's stay there because I think that's an important. Very, we could spend the rest of our time on this topic. We probably won't, but let's stay here for a minute because I'm glad you brought this up because yeah, I do think it is 4 times. I think that's the most recent number. It's 4 times as many men. And I'm not worried about offending anybody committing suicide. Like I don't care if it offends you or you don't like the word. Like that is actually what you're doing. Yeah, taking your own life sounds like that's clear what you're doing, but it is the committing of suicide. So curious. So we're saying that there's maybe a meaning crisis in masculinity, right? Men are struggling with finding purpose or meaning. Would you agree with that statement? And if so, what do you think's driving? What do you think's driving that crisis?
There's a lot of interesting messaging around for men at the moment. So you look at men, and let's take cartoons for example. Years ago the cartoons maybe would portray the man of the family as a strong man, whereas cartoons now, the men are fat, weak, and pathetic, and those men can't support their family as much as they can support themselves in a fist fight or or anything else that happened. And I see for a lot of men, things around the environment making them weak and sick. And you look at the food people eat and the environment around them. All these things contribute to guys kind of just being docile. And you look at the last 2 years, I always use it as an example. When lockdowns happened, most guys just said, okay, fair enough, I just won't go out, I won't see my family and stuff. And there was no like, fuck that, I'm going to go and demonstrate, or I'm going to go and speak to someone, or I'm going to show my displeasure. It's just like, I'll just do what I'm told and I'll shut up. And I I think maybe that is changing because more and more people are looking around in the last 2 years and thought, hold on a minute, some of what's happened doesn't really make sense here. But that's another interesting podcast. So I think for a lot of guys, having purpose in their life is so important. And if a guy hasn't, then they turn to their coping mechanisms. I mean, we can talk about porn, scrolling, overeating, undereating, overexercising, drink, drugs, all those different things. And they're so readily available now. I mean, porn as example, but prescription drugs as well as, let's say, off street market drugs. All these different things are highly available. And I think guys are easily put onto that stuff, and it's very hard to get out of it.
Do you think sometimes guys they hear like life's purpose and I think sometimes they're scared to fully embrace that there is a purpose and calling for their life. Like it's almost this insurmountable thing, right? It's like maybe there's fear behind if I know that there's a purpose and I don't succeed in doing it, then I'm a failure. How can a guy maybe get past some of these fears of chasing after his purpose or chasing after his passions and begin to turn his passion into the purpose for his life?
Yeah, it can seem what's the term, like a mountain to climb. And I probably, I think the first thing is being honest with yourself and saying, like, if I know some guys that are really just happy with their life, the way it's going, and I'm like, great. But I also know a lot of guys that are like, again, looking around, being like, is this it? I know I'm capable of more. The first thing is like an honest conversation with yourself. Because I had that, I could have stayed in the city. I was offered other roles, didn't particularly like it, but I could have still been there now, earning about 100 grand a year and still going to Miami on my holidays and driving around in nice cars, but ultimately living as I know it's been coined by Joe Rogan, but a quiet life of desperation. And for a lot of guys, they're not taking the time to, let's call it, contemplate what they really want out of life. Because we're not taught that, are we? But the education system is to create workers. That's it. They're not to create inspired, enlightened individuals. It is you turn up when we ring the bell, you wear what we tell you, you learn what we tell you, and you memorize it so that you can then repeat it and we'll give you a grade. So you can then go into a big company and be an employee or a worker bee and serve the whatever you want to call it at the top of the tree, if that makes sense. It's not, the education system isn't there to create, kind of, 20 somethings who are really looking to kind of run their own business or something like that. And I think a lot of guys can get onto that treadmill of life, or hamster wheel as we call it, and that's where some of the problems lie, because you get to middle age and you're just like, no, I'm really bored, but no one helps you apart from men's coaches, hopefully, to say, well, what do you want? You know?
Do you think happiness is a worthy pursuit? You had mentioned in the beginning of what you shared there, that last bit, is a lot of guys that and I know them as well. They kind of step back and they understand what you're doing. They're like, yeah, we love that you're chasing all this growth, development, go become the best version of yourself. I'm happy in my life. When I hear a guy say he's happy or he's trying to become happy, I see that as a flawed approach. I don't think the purpose of life is to be happy. I think happiness will be a byproduct of fulfillment, joy, seeking your passion. But to think that my goal every day is to be happy, like I see a lot of men falling into that trap. So I'm just curious with you, do you think happiness is a worthy goal and pursuit? And if not, what should we be pursuing?
Yeah, you've just said it. Happiness. I remember being at an event where the guy was asking people, like, it sounds silly, but just go, all right, what do you want? And people would be like, oh, I just want to be happy. And he's like, we can be happy now. That's just a feeling. So, you get to choose how you feel, which I think has been one of the, for me, it sounds obvious, but it was a light bulb moment. The saying, your thoughts control your feelings. And, you can't control your thoughts coming into your head, because if someone waves, if you switch this on and I had like a bright green hat that looked like a dinosaur, you'd be like, what is this guy doing? But so you can't control what your brain decides to think about and focus on, but you can decide how long you're gonna give it some energy. And for a lot of people, they don't realize that they get to decide how they feel. So you're right, happiness is a byproduct, I think, of, because I know people that have got nothing that are really happy. So it's not that you, if you accumulate more, you'll be happy. You get to choose whether you're happy every second of the day. I think for a lot of guys, feeling like you're building something, and someone said legacy, but I know a lot of guys don't really give a shit about legacy, because to be honest, they're too busy trying to get done what they need to right now to worry about what they're going to leave in the future. But I think if you can be doing purposeful work, then for you, you're kind of on the right path. And that doesn't mean it has to be your primary, let's call it, income, because like it or not, income pays the bills and we have kids to feed, or you want to have nice things and you want to go travel. So at some point you want some income, and as far as I'm concerned, there's nothing wrong with wanting loads of money, because the more money you have, it just amplifies who you are. It's like alcohol, isn't it? If you're a dick and you get drunk, you'll probably be more of a dick. But if you're someone that's got loads of money and you're really nice and caring and considerate and generous, hopefully you'll kind of be more of that. But I do see for a lot of people, especially guys, it's like they need to be feeling like they're working towards something. And one of our biggest podcasts, which I mean for us was big, had like 35,000 downloads or something. But the guy who was interviewed there said, the adventure is kind of, as you know, the adventure is trying to achieve what I want to achieve. And you learn and grow and network and what have you as you're doing it, like us two now, like the podcast. People are like, oh, I can do a podcast. Like, well, you could, even if no one listens to it, you will learn from the people you're interviewing, and you'll grow exponentially yourself, even if you don't have a Joe Rogan $100 million contract. So I think for a lot of people, it's it's taking that first move, like asking, what do you want first? It doesn't have to be monetarily or not, but working on something that you enjoy and you love and gives you energy, I think is absolutely priceless.
Yeah, we did I think it was the beginning of 2022. I did 5 tips to make 2022 the best year ever. And one of the tips this was last year at the beginning, was for everybody to spend 30 to 60 minutes every single day, every single week in intentional, uninterrupted conversation with another person. Sit down in a podcast software. You don't even need to record it. Just sit down and have a deep, meaningful, curiosity-based conversation about what's driving you, about what you're curious about, this back and forth that we're kind of doing. You don't even need to record it and produce it. Just sit down and have intentional conversation with the phone left in another room. So many people can't even sit at a dinner table without looking at their screen. Curious, because you said one of the big things that changed your life was learning that you are in control of your thoughts, feelings, and emotions at all times. Can you walk us through, if you have a process there, how do you, when you have a thought that's maybe driving some negative thoughts and feelings, how do you, elevate, transcend above that and get yourself back into a proper state of mind?
Yeah, it's really hard, and I like all things in life. The more you practice and work at it, the better you'll get. But I catch myself. I mean, again, we've got two boys who are 5.5, one's 3.5, and then we've got a newborn baby who's only 2 weeks old. And the two, of course, boys have unlimited energy, and rightly so. As kids, they just want to have fun, and they have no thought of the consequences of what they're doing. So sometimes you're trying to, you can't control kids, and you shouldn't be trying to control them, but they can drive you absolutely mad sometimes because they're living in the moment and they're not worried about being late for something or, whatever. And that's been one of the biggest tests for me, is especially working from home a lot of the time. Sometimes you still find yourself like losing your shit completely about something, but still being able to go, hold on a minute, like I'm really pissed off because this has just happened. But I can decide whether I'm going to be pissed off for the rest of the day, or I can decide whether I'm just going to kind of take a moment to let it go. Great example. I always use this one. About 5 years ago, I had a client come to see me and walked in, and you can see someone's just it's, had a bad day. And I was like, right, look, I don't really care what's happened. I said, I'm just checking with you. How long do you want to stay pissed off for? Are you doing like a 24-hour one, or are you going to do a 2-hour one? The client's like, what do you mean? Like already kind of broken the state of, and I was like, well, because it's up to you. So, hey, cool. If you want to be pissed off for an hour, sweet. If you want to do a full day, I'd do a 24-hour one, let me know. And you could see when I'd explain that it's up to you how you feel, then it kind of, starts releasing the pressure on your shoulders. And that client was like, kind of laughed about it, was like, yeah, I see what you mean. And I was like, listen, we all get, everybody gets pissed off about things now and again because stuff happens. But for me, being able to, and it took a while to work on it, being able to stop and think to yourself, I've just reacted like this and I've just shouted or I've just done whatever, but actually I'm seething, but I can decide whether I want to stay like that. It was a real game changer. That's why we put it in our, we developed an energy protocol course a couple of years ago for guys, because we felt like, a guy can have great intentions, but if he's lethargic and tired and, feeling like he's, I don't know, got brain fog, then he's probably not going to achieve all he wants to. So we put that in as the mindset part of our energy protocol course. We did sleep, nutrition, fitness, mindset, morning routine to combine some of the basics that I thought would help a guy just get moving in the right direction. And one of the things there was your thoughts control your feelings. It's as simple as that, but you just have to keep kind of reminding yourself. It's not easy, but it is doable.
Yeah, yeah. Walk us through, I want to go back a little bit in your story. Walk us through the transition from corporate Anthony into entrepreneur coaching Anthony. Was it a burning of I know you said you had some money kind of sort of way because you had kind of been wise with some of your financials. So was it a burning of the ships? Like you just cut it off with the financial job and like, I'm going all in on this? Or was there a transitional period where it's like you kind of brought down slowly, fizzled out some of your work and you were kind of juggling two things? I think there would be a lot of value in there because I know we have a lot of our men that are like in that place, right? It's like they've been working in the corporate America. They're maybe doing a couple, part-time jobs just to keep their head above water, paying the bills, but they know they want to be that entrepreneur. They know they want to go out on their own. For me, I was fortunate back a decade ago when I first started business. I had been coached and mentored for a couple years by somebody else. So when I went out on my own, it was like I felt like I had everything I needed from finance, from education, from the ability to really step into the industry that I was stepping into. So I burned the ships, right? Like I didn't have any other income coming in other than my main business. But for you, what was that kind of transition from corporate America? And I keep saying corporate America, I'm sorry, corporate Anthony into entrepreneur Anthony.
It was a big lesson, and I would say now, if I had my time again, I would have done the continue with my job. I mean, I'd started studying on the side, but I wasn't doing coaching on the side. I was doing free coaching, but I wasn't charging for it. And of course, a lot of guys will understand. Sometimes it's hard because if you're working for a company and you get contractually, supposedly 100% all in, and then they're like, "You're doing other stuff on the side. Are you, are you 100% all in with this company if you're now doing something on the side as well?" And I can understand that. So if I would say to guys, let's say you're in a job and you hate your job so much that it's, you're thinking, I cannot do this anymore, then that is the time to burn your bridges and burn the ships and leave maybe if it's so painful for you. But if not, ideally, I think you stay in your job and, like you say, you start with your minimum viable product that you're going to make money from in your next adventure, and you work on, like you say, let's say you're earning 50 grand a year. Can I make 5 grand a year from my other thing? Can I make 10 grand a year? Because if you aren't making anything, maybe you're going to leave and it's not going to work anyway. Now, if I had my time again, that's what I would have done. But it is hard because you're working really long hours on that, and you've got to have some time and energy for the other thing. I mean, I was lucky that I got when I say I lucky, I had saved up a lot of money. So luck, it's not lucky to save money, it's lucky that you weren't out pissing it up the wall, drinking and doing other stuff. Sometimes I'd be like, do you know what, I was still spending good money, but I was like, hey, I've got this much coming in each month, I'm going to take this portion, put it away, spend some and enjoy some. So it gave me that buffer. But when I left, it was really hard because, yeah, suddenly not only did I lose kind of the accountability of others as well, because when you're working on your own, you're like, well, no one cares whether you do any work this week or not. And when it's sunny, I'd sometimes be like, right, I'm getting on with stuff. And then it'd be like mid-afternoon and you're like, actually, I'm just going to lay in the garden for a bit because I'm worth a break. And then 3 hours later, you'd find that you were still sunbathing or something like that. And that's one of the issues, I think, is accountability, because when you work for a company, you've got to do stuff. And if you don't perform, you'll get, someone will tap you on the shoulder. But when you go off on your own, so I would say, if you can work out a minimum viable product that you've got that's making money, look at what the trajectory of it. If it's going up and it's scalable, then you can look at either leaving your job or taking a lesser paid job and trying to balance them up. But when I left, it was hard, and that's why when I first started the Whole Man Academy, that was probably a year after I'd left, and I didn't know exactly what the Whole Man Academy was going to become, and that was pretty much 5 years ago. But what I did learn was that the more you listen to people like us, and what I mean is guys that have been there and done it, you might hear from guys and pick up that one little tip or a bit of advice or suggestion or story that will help you, you know, make it less painful to go and do that. Because if you fuck it up and you leave and you've got bills to pay and kids to feed and mortgages and car payments and what have you, it's very painful if very quickly your new idea doesn't go very well. Because I would say it's very easy. It's very easy to leave a job. It's very hard to go back to it, depending on what it is.
Brother, you're speaking on some really important things here, man. I've been fortunate and had the opportunity to work with hundreds of entrepreneurs over the last couple of years in some business masterminds that I've been involved in. I've been, like an accelerator coach in one of them. So a lot of the work that I did was with early stage entrepreneurs, people that were just trying to get their businesses off the ground. And I think what you said there, it's like if you're a shitty employee in somebody else's job, you're probably going to be a shitty employee for yourself. Whether you like the job or not, like if you're not a good worker, if you're not somebody that shows up on time, does the work, whether you're happy doing it or not, chances of you doing that in your own company are slim to none. I think people buy into this false belief that once I launch my own business, like I'm gonna have this easy cakewalk life. Most times for the first 3, 5, 7 years, unless you've just been very good and successful and lucky, you are working double the amount of time in your own business that you are in your own. And if you don't have great discipline, great self leadership, you're going to be the worst employee you've ever had work for yourself. So
Yeah, you'll
curious,
get
like
found out.
what traits, yeah, what characteristics or traits are necessary for somebody to be a successful entrepreneur? I'm just curious your take on that.
Yeah, I always think one of the things is for me is like how you start the day. I think is so important because we can all have levels of motivation. Some days you wake up. I mean, I would say in this country, I mean, it's been raining all day today, and through the winter, it's dark it's dark until nearly 8 o'clock in the morning, and it's dark by 4:30 in the afternoon. And those dark mornings sometimes can be through the winter can be really painful because it's cold. And we got to like -12 the other a few months ago, even where I live, which isn't high up north in the country. So those mornings especially, it's the discipline and having a framework. Now I always talk about morning routine because I think how you start your day has a great bearing on kind of how you're going to go from there. Because if you start it confused and you know confused about what you're doing, and I'm not sure if I know this that, then it's kind of going to that sends a ripple effect for the rest of the day. Whereas if you can get up, and I'll share it with people, we talk about a morning routine, and I think morning routines are great. And there's a 4-step morning routine called move, breathe, think, and drink. So MBTD. I kind of do talk to the companies about this stuff because, again, I think the higher up the chain you are, the more important maybe it is for you to start your day the right way. But if you can get up and when I say move, bring a small amount of exercise. It doesn't have to be going to the gym. It could be whatever it is for you. It could be 10 push-ups. It could be, 5 minutes of yoga. It could be, just walking to the station. But getting your body going in the morning, however it works for you, is a good start. Breathe being, I mean, it takes a long time to explain it generally, but most people are just get up and they're doing stuff. Whereas actually stopping and doing a very brief bit of breath work, which I learned through the importance of that through the Tony Robbins. Most people are breathing up here instead of big old belly breathing, as we call it. It's like on Thanksgiving or Christmas Day when you got to let your trousers out because your belly's got so big. So that would be the breathe. Think being, what have I got to achieve today? And drink being, I'm a coffee lover, but the first thing you drink in the morning shouldn't be coffee or caffeine. You're trying to look to nourish your body instead of actually hitting it with something. So I would always say like apple cider vinegar with warm water, or hot lemon with warm water, big green smoothies, or just filtered water, not tap water, things like that, just to, after 8 or 9 hours of like not drinking, is just kind of flushing your body through. So for me, out of the 120 like guys I've interviewed on the podcast, a large percentage of them have some kind of morning routine, because if they can start the day focused, energized, ready to kind of do the important things first, it helps them get started. And then you can kind of add in loads and loads of other tips and stuff. But that's for me is one of the biggest things.
Yeah, it does so many things for you, man. It eliminates having to make decisions first thing in the morning. We know decision fatigue and willpower is a limited resource that runs out over the course of a day. So if you start your day not having to make a lot of decisions because it's a routine that you just follow and execute every single day, then you have some of that stored decision making up for later on in the day, which is obviously a lot of what we help our guys do, is navigating some of the end of the day stuff when you're kind of more tired, triggered, and anxious. And then number two, it's the stacking of the wins, right? It's like building that momentum. Like I believe too, like you win the morning, you're higher probability of winning the day. It's not going to be a guarantee that you're going to win every single day, but building off of that momentum, it's like, okay, now I'm in the groove. Now I'm winning things. Now I can go attack on harder, more difficult task. I want to get into the Whole Man Academy here and kind of actually some of the work and the podcast and the coaching. Let's see if we can get kind of real tactical and kind of give some guys some tips on how they can, change, transform, and go on and build an epic life. Talk to me about the meaning behind Whole Man Academy. I'm assuming with the title there, it isn't something that you just picked out of a hat. Why aren't men whole today? And what does it mean to be a whole man?
Yeah, for me it was let's use a few examples. And male or female listening to this, you'll know people, you can apply it to men or women. Some people will have I would say you might have a great body and a great job, and you've got a family, but something else in your life is letting you down. You might have other people who've got loads of money in the bank, but they're really overweight and they're fat and sick and tired, and they've got to work on that side of it. you might have some guys I knew who have got all the, all the boxes ticked, but they haven't got a partner to share it with. And I always think that's one of the big things in life, is finding someone that, you can care for you, and you can share things with. And so many guys, you would say, when we say becoming whole, it means that pretty much, every area of your life is about an 8 out of 10. It's very hard to be 10 out of 10 in all these things. And that's where we went to when I started the Whole Man Academy. People assumed that it should just be all about mental health. But I'm like, do you know what? Mental health is just one part of what makes up a man, because again, some of the people I know, they might have lots of other things in their life going badly, but actually their mindset and that side of it is absolutely fine. So you would say to a guy, when I worked in the city, I would say if there was like 300 guys on a broking floor, if you said, hey guys, who wants to come to a mental health event this weekend? The guys don't want to come to it. They'll just tell you to, shove it or throw a book at you or a magazine or something. But if you said, hey guys, there's a mental strength and resilience event for men, we've got special forces, we've got entrepreneurs, we've got ex-sports guys coming along, who wants to come along? Suddenly I'm putting my hand up and all the others are. So for us, it was about creating like aspirational events at cool locations for men to come and meet other men who want to live an epic life. And you and I know your epic life and my epic life are completely different, maybe. For me, I value staying at home or seeing my kids a lot. I'm not interested in traveling too much unless it's with my family. I want to, give them bath time. I want to do that stuff. I want to connect with guys across the world. I have no interest in building some massive company where I've got like 100 employees. Most of the guys I know that have got that are spend so long pissing about or trying to not be stressed at dealing with all the employees, they've forgotten why they started their company in the first place. You know, so the whole man meaning we try and take all areas of a man's life and help him improve them to a point that he wants to get to, so he feels like he's not kind of lacking in one area. That's where the events came in, which we started in 2018, and 2018 was our first event. Wasn't sure if anybody would come along. Your mates say they're going to come, but you never know. You can't trust anybody these days to actually give you their time. But we had 25 guys at that first event. And then, in early 2019, we had our biggest event, which was like 65 guys came along to it. Really cool location in London, gin and tonics being served, a lot of guys dressed up smartly, had some expert speakers on mindset and all these different things. And the guys were like, hey, we love it. And then, we had dinners, events, and then guess what? 2020, suddenly the powers that be and our glorious governments who know how to keep us safe decided to shut everything down. And that's kind of where things for us, we had to adapt or we would have finished basically. And that's why we started the podcast, which I'd planned to do anyway, but that gave me the sometimes you need someone to elbow you in the back to make you go and do the thing you've been talking about doing. And that's kind of where we started with the podcast basically.
Amazing, man. I think you mentioned mental health being one of the pillars areas that we need to work on, but just a small segment of it. I love the analogy that you gave there, right? When you kind of poll guys like, hey, who wants to go to a mental health seminar this week? And it's like you get zero responses, but who wants to go train and kick some ass with some Navy Force, SEALs, special ops and what like that? You get all the guys to sign up. I remember one of my early mentors in the fitness space back in 2017, the online fitness space. Because even back then, like I knew that I started Frank Rich Fitness, which was a very specific muscle building company. Like we helped intermediate to advanced guys really accelerate breakthrough plateaus. So specifically speaking to like a guy that's spent some time already in the gym is trying to get his body to the next level. But even back in 2017 with Frank Rich Fitness, like I had this personal development, self-help kind of like it was always fabricated and brought in through my messaging. And I remember my mentor saying, Frank, like it's okay. You can help people change their lives, but you need to lead with the fitness stuff. People will come into your world for the fitness stuff and they'll stay for the life advice. And that's been true because I built everything I'm doing today off the back end of a failed fitness company, but it got me attention. It got me some following. It helped me build somewhat of a small personal brand. And then we've been able to leverage that because we've been consistent with providing the value, the content, helping guys level up in their lives. So mental health being one area, what are some of the areas, other specific areas? I mean, have you broken this down like with the Whole Man Academy? Is there like a pillar framework that you operate from? Like what makes a whole man?
Yeah, and it's funny because depending on different guys you speak to, some guys value certain things more than others. I think that's important to point out as well. I mean, there's the old saying, it's generally only people that have got a lot of money that say, "Oh, I don't care about money," which, which I noticed that a lot when you speak to people who had millions and they were like, "Oh, money doesn't mean much to me." And you're like, That's because you've got loads of it, so you're not worried about it. But there's multiple things. But like we said, your fitness, your health, your relationships, your finances, your purpose and fulfillment, all these different things start to kind of encompass what is the whole man. Um, and do you know what? With I guess with a lot of the podcasts we've done as well, you start to look at a lot of guys and you realize that you value things at different times of your life as well. And I think for me, I don't know if I wrote it in the notes, but so I, around the age of in my mid early 30s, was so bored with normal life, if that makes sense, that I used to play a lot of football and then I got injured and then I just got bored of it after a while. And then I found obstacle course racing. So like the Spartan races and all that. And I went and did one race, which was a Men's Health, the Men's Health magazine. They hosted a big race in London, and I hadn't trained for it at all. But I came like across the finish line like in like 200th place out of like 5,000, and I was like, oh, I'm all right at this. If I trained more, had the right equipment, and knew what I was doing. So I basically for quite a few years I did nearly 100 obstacle course races across the world, and ended up qualifying for the World Championships in America. So I came out to Ohio and represented the country, Team GB, and raced in my age category because I was in my 30s. I'm not going to compete with 22-year-old professional athletes. That's ridiculous. I want to compete against the guys who are 2 or 3 years either side of me. But you know what? That's what at the time, for me, I had my health, my fitness, my mindset, my morning routine, my sleep, all these different things just about cooking nicely. And that for me kind of created what was the whole man. I'm not a fighter, but I would say that a guy should be able to take care of himself, take care of his family, should be able to run a marathon, climb a mountain, do 10 pull-ups, do 100 push-ups, not all at once, but encompassing all those different things. So you are fit, strong, agile, and able to kind of take care of yourself and others, basically.
Yeah. God, I love that, man. I don't think I knew that bit about. I knew you had done the obstacle course and were moderately successful. I didn't realize you had that stint of a that amount of volume in those races. Do you think a guy can become a success if he's not physically fit? I've been talking a lot about this. I think fitness is at one of the highest priorities. Just it should be for all of us. Like I don't think you can become the best version of yourself if you're fat, out of shape. Not everybody needs to be a bodybuilder, right? I spent 10 years focused on building as much muscle as I possibly could. Took a different path than you did. You said I want to go these obstacle, build all the endurance. I may struggle to run a mile here. I probably could get it done. It may take me a little bit, but I could probably do it. But my path to fitness has been like the physical development, the aesthetic side of things. And not everybody needs to be big, strong, and jacked. But if you're out of shape, I see that as like every time you see yourself in the mirror, it's a reminder that you don't really care about yourself as much as you could and should be. Like the feedback that you get if you see yourself fat, out of shape, is hey, you don't really prioritize your health. And I don't think you can fully become the best version of yourself. So, talk about the importance, I know you briefly touched on it, of being fit, healthy, and making that like a key priority in our life.
I think I think when you look at men, I asked the question once, like, should all men get at one time in their life in the best shape they could ever possibly be? Now, some guys just can't
Yes,
be
they
bothered, and
should.
I get that. Some guys are like, I'm just not interested in it. I hate the gym and what have you. But I think when you see a guy that's out of shape, it sounds harsh, but it shows lack of discipline. Because if you can't, if you're uneducated to the point where you're eating crap and you're not bothering to work out, you're probably going to live a shorter life. You know, you can argue all day about stuff, but on the average person, if you're gonna show lack of discipline in the fact that you can't be bothered to, work out, eat slightly healthier, take care of yourself, how can people look up to you and be like, hey, this guy's a good leader, especially your kids or if you're some fat fuck who's just like out of breath all the time. And that for me, I look around and I'm impressed when guys, I don't care what a guy has, but if he's got a great body, even guys who take steroids, because you have to put the work in. Even I've never touched steroids and never was planning to, but it's funny. I've seen some guys who have been on steroids, and guys will say, "Oh yeah, well they take steroids." I'm like, "Yeah, they still live in the gym. They still had to get up early or train late or work and eat and etc. etc." So
Yeah, no,
it's not.
people don't understand that steroids don't do anything other than allow you to recover quicker.
Mm,
You still have to work,
yeah,
oftentimes harder. All it's
yeah,
doing is it's speeding up the recovery. It's not
mm,
doing the work for you. And I think I'm so glad you said that because I've been open about it. I competed as a bodybuilder. I definitely took anabolics like in my life. I'm on TRT now. It's something that I will pay the price for the decisions that I made. But I do not believe that the reason I built the body that I did was because I took any shot. It may have helped in the recovery. I still had to go kick my ass in the gym every single day. And I would
Yeah.
challenge most people to spend an hour with me when I was in my prime. You wouldn't have been able to handle it. So I'm so glad you said that, because it's not the quick fix. You still
Yeah.
got to put the work in. So I'm sorry. I
Well,
didn't mean to, I didn't mean to hijack
no,
that.
Frank, I think that's a really important point. I mean, I got to a stage where I had I would say a cover model body. So I was never like massively muscly, but I would consider that I could have been on Men's Health cover model, that on the front cover of something like that.
Mm-hmm.
My ego would have loved that to have happened. But that was also born from, and I think a guy can, or male female can learn from this. I was driven to that also because when I was in my 20s, I had a collapsed lung. So through no, I wasn't doing exercise, what have you. It's called a spontaneous pneumothorax. So I literally was like doing my shoes up, got up and was like, like, and you felt like someone, someone like whacks you in the stomach and you feel like winded and you can't get your breath. And I was like, oh. But anyway, I started driving home from my friend's house, and halfway home, I thought I was having a heart attack. Now, we know there's a lot of heart attacks around these days for various reasons, but at the time, and I was only 20, my left arm started going numb, and I was getting real pain in here. And I pulled up at my parents' house, and what's happened is your lung has, like, if you think like a balloon, it's torn. Therefore, the air is outside of your lung in your chest cavity, and it's compressing your heart and your organs, basically. So I got carted off to hospital in an ambulance, and I basically couldn't do exercise for about 6 months, and I had a very nasty operation called a pleurectomy, which sticks the outer or sticks your lung. It reinflates it and sticks it to the outer wall of your chest. So my left lung doesn't go up and down, whereas your other lung obviously is like an accordion or a balloon. But what that gave me was, there's that saying, your worst day sometimes is your best day, because I couldn't do exercise for 6 months. And in that time, I was like, man, I'm getting skinny, and I want girlfriends, and I want to be able to perform on the pitch and stuff. So in that time, I started learning and learning and learning about, consuming, about protein and training and timing and recovery and rest and all the different things, which meant that as soon as I could, I was back in the gym. And I would never used to go to the gym. That was the point. And I suddenly went to the gym to rebuild, but I basically probably increase my muscle mass by about 30% or something like that. It was a significant difference. And what did that give me? A new appreciation for certain things in life. Because when I ran out on that football pitch, I'd been told I wouldn't play football to a competitive standard, and I was like, yeah, I will, believe me. And that first season, I won Player of the Year, Managers Player of the Year, because I was appreciating that I might have lost all of that. And that just drove me on. And like for a lot of people, sometimes you can look back and you're like, yeah, that was terrible. But that, in a way, I can use that as a positive to drive positive change.
Yeah, it's amazing, man. And what a perspective of gratitude that experience was able to really bring into you. Um, Wrapping it up here, last couple of minutes here, Anthony. You mentioned it at the beginning. I think before we recorded, you also dropped it here earlier on in the conversation that you got a new baby. I think 2 weeks old. It's the third one. Which congratulations, man. What does being a father mean to you, and what has being a father taught you?
Yeah. Um, I didn't realize how much free time I used to have, for one. Back before we had kids, I was so sometimes you don't know what it's got till it's gone. And I'll paint you the picture on a Saturday morning. My partner Emma, who's the mother of my three kids as well, she loved CrossFit and exercise, and she worked at the same company as me. So a Saturday, we would kind of, get up fairly early, probably do have a coffee or whatever it is, and then we'd head to the gym together, work out, come back, shower, eat a nice brunch, high protein rich steaks and sausages and eggs and all the, spinach and some good stuff like that. Then we'd probably go for a nice walk, and then in the afternoon you'd do stuff. Doesn't happen ever anymore when you've got kids, obviously, that need you. Um, but one of the big things for us is that we home educate our kids as well. So it's always a touchy subject because home education is on the rise. But it's very hard to talk to some people about it, because if their kids are in school, you don't want them to feel like you're saying they're doing the wrong thing. But we know for our boys that, especially, we made the decision a few years ago that school isn't a nurturing place. And I touched on that earlier. For kids, we want them to learn what they want when they are ready to, not be told to sit at a desk for X amount of hours a day and just get them ready for work, if that makes sense. So that adds a new dimension into us. But, I read something the other day where a guy said, I learn more from my children than they learn from me. And for me, it's exactly the same, because so many times you try to get them to do things, And if you ask yourself why, it's like, because in my subconscious, or in my, that's how it's always been done. That's how I was told it was done. And you realize that kids just don't have that indoctrination yet to be like, why can't I do this? Why can't I do that? Why can't I, and you're just like, shit, yeah, why can't you? It's because I've been told, or you've been, you've had a thumb in your eye told you can't do that stuff. So for me, having kids has been great. It's been a real test, but often you wonder who's teaching who, basically.
I love that, man. So much. Thank you for sharing that. And once again, man, I'm not scared to offend anybody. If you have your kids in public school, you're doing the wrong thing. There you go. I'll say it for for everybody that's out there. No, I know there's obviously certain situations where people can't, but we've been very open in here about our views and perspective. We've done an entire episode on homeschooling. It's something very, very passionate about. Obviously, like I said, I know that there's certain situations where that's maybe not an option. I think a large portion of our audience would probably agree with a similar perspective that you and
Mm.
I hold
Well,
here,
well, Frank,
Anthony.
I'll just say this quickly.
This,
I'll say this quickly. You could look at it that society, no, or what do you call it? The powers that be have made the cost of living so much that all couples need to be working, and therefore they can't afford to home educate their kids. You know, because that's one of the big things inflation is at food inflation is at 20% over here. I
yeah,
mean, they lie about it and say
yeah.
it's 10%, which is just total BS. But a lot of families say to us, and financially it affects us because one of us can't work most of the time and can't bring in extra money, so we have to make sacrifices. But for a lot of people, they're like,
Yeah, there
I
are
really
elements
would.
of truth there.
Yeah, they'll want to home educate, but they can't afford to because the cost of living is high as well now, and they'd have to make large sacrifices. And I totally get that because we have to as well.
Yeah, well, that's the key, right? Is they'd have to make large sacrifices. So it's like, what are you willing to sacrifice? Sacrifice your child's potential future and setting them up with a proper educational path, or sacrifice the second car, the boat, maybe downsizing the home. Everything is a sacrifice. I definitely do understand that we're living through some difficult financial times, but there's choices that we all make on a daily basis that could be done a little bit differently. But yeah, there's obviously forces working against some of these things. That's a conversation for a different time. We'll do a whole nother 60-minute podcast episode on some of that. But bring today's to a close, man. Tell us about what you're excited and you guys got on deck for Whole Man Academy. Any big projects you're working on right now?
Yeah, the big one for me, and it's something I know I'm going to look back and wish we'd have done years ago. But we realised so much of the Whole Man Academy is about creating like a strong network of guys that want to like live their own version of an epic life. And I think that's been taken away from men in the last couple of years. Working from home and stuff like that isn't working for a lot of men. So we're going to launch the Whole Man membership in a couple of weeks' time, which we're never trying to add in more work for a guy, but we're trying to add in connection and opportunities for guys to grow, basically, mentally, physically, and their own kind of, their own network. So yeah, the Whole Man membership. And one thing I love doing is we send out a Whole Man journal 3 times a week, which is basically little insights to maximize your mindset, body, and performance. And that for me is like you just get to pass on all the things that I consume from all the, like yourself. I'll listen to you, I'll listen to someone else, and you'll get these little golden nuggets and send them out in bite-sized chunks so guys can apply it kind of one golden nugget at a time, basically. So yeah, excited for the future, and I know you're going to be on our podcast very soon, so I'm looking forward to getting some stuff out of you as well.
Yeah, absolutely, brother. And tell the guys where they could connect with you, find more about the Whole Man Academy, the membership, the podcast, drive all the links, and we'll tie it up with our last question here.
Cool. Yeah, best place is just to head to the website, which is unsurprisingly www.wholemanacademy.com. And all the links are on there. And if anybody's on LinkedIn and wants to join me on there, I am Anthony Astbury, and I've got a lovely profile picture. So come and say hi, basically.
Yeah, awesome, guys. And we'll get all that information shared down there in the show notes. Definitely make sure to connect with Anthony. Like I said, he'll be returning this interview, and he'll have me on his show here in a couple of weeks. So we'll make sure to get that shared out for you guys as well. So, Anthony, we'd like to end every episode with our final question. Obviously, the title of the show is called The Superhuman Life. For me, when I talk about living a superhuman life, I see it as a belief system, or how I try to show up and live in the world every single day. So kind of a frame of reference or a worldview that I see things through. And it's coming from the place that I do believe that we're put on this earth for a purpose. There's a calling on each and every one of our lives. We touched on purpose here in today's conversation. But knowing that, I don't believe is enough, Anthony. We need to be very intentional about our growth, about our development, and then how we bring that purpose to the world in service of others. So when you tie all that together, in my opinion, that's living a superhuman life. But I like to end every single episode with the guest take. So Anthony Astbury, as we close out today's conversation, how would you define living a superhuman life?
I think one of the most important things, there's many aspects to living your own version of a superhuman life, but being or having the ability to question things. Because in the last few years, I've seen so many people that are so closed minded and they do not want to allow themselves to realize they've been hoodwinked or conned or something like that, and got something wrong. And for me, being able to, if you want to talk about being superhuman, a superhuman strength is the ability to question things and know you might be wrong on something, basically, and be happy with it.
193 episodes. We've never had an answer like that one. I love when we get different takes, different perspectives. Brother, this has been an absolute honor. Guys, ask yourself better questions. Tony Robbins said, the quality of your life will be dictated by the quality of your questions. Dr. John DeMartini shared the 7 questions here 20 episodes ago to improve the quality of your life. So after listening today, go back and listen to that episode. We'll link it down there in the show notes. But guys, if you're getting value out of these conversations, we want to thank you again for joining us here today. And we want to ask for your help in continuing to spread this message. We've seen some tremendous growth over these last few months, and it's all because of you guys getting out there and sharing these conversations. So first off, if you haven't done so yet and you are getting value, make sure to leave that 5-star rating and written review wherever you're consuming these shows. But more importantly, if there's a guy in your life right now, maybe struggling with navigating and finding his purpose, maybe he needs some insights on how to ask better questions in his life, do us a favor and do him the blessing by sharing today's conversation with him. But for Anthony Astbury of the Whole Man Academy, your host Frank Rich here. We love you guys, and we'll see you next week.